Have you ever felt like you're trying to put together one of those huge 1,000-piece puzzles, but somebody keeps swapping out the pieces while you're working on it?
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what it feels like trying to follow this situation that's unfolding over in Sri Lanka. And you sent me some really interesting stuff about this renewable energy project that seems to have just gone completely sideways.
It's a really fascinating case study, and it kind of gets at that intersection of economics and politics.
Mm-hmm.
And, how those two things never really exist in isolation, especially when you're dealing with a country that's facing some serious, really serious economic headwinds.
It really makes you realize that it's not just about a wind farm, right? This is about national strategy and international relations and all these things that are so deeply connected. So let's rewind the clock a little bit, go back to 2022. Sri Lanka's economy was, to put it mildly, struggling.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a tough time. And the government at the time, led by President Ranil Wickremesinghe, was really pushing to attract foreign investment to try and, stabilize things.
Right, trying to bring in some much-needed capital.
Exactly. And one of the big ideas they had was this $1 billion wind power project. They wanted to build it in Mannar, and the plan was to get Adani Green Energy, which is an Indian company, to come in and, really put some serious money into it.
Makes sense. On the surface, at least, right?
Yeah, the thinking seemed to be that it'd boost Sri Lanka's energy capacity, which they desperately needed, and kind of signal to other investors, especially from India, that Sri Lanka was open for business.
And not just open for business, but, thinking long-term, investing in renewables.
Right, getting on board with that global trend.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A lot of potential positives there.
But, and there's almost always a but when it comes to politics, right?
Always seems to be a twist in the tail.
Yeah, so in 2024, a new government comes into power. This time it's President Anura Kumara Dissanayake and the MPP party. And they had some serious doubts about this whole Adani deal. And once they were in charge, they started asking some hard questions, particularly about the cost.
Which is their prerogative. Any new government's going to scrutinize the deals made by their predecessors.
Sure, yeah, but they were suggesting that the cost was way inflated and even hinting that there might have been some, well, let's just say some less than transparent dealings going on.
Corruption, you mean?
Yeah, that's the word they were dancing around.
It's a tough situation because that kind of uncertainty can really spook investors.
Totally. It makes them think twice about putting their money in. And Adani, well, they weren't too keen on renegotiating. In February of this year, they just pulled out of the project entirely.
Wow, so they just walked away.
Pretty much. And get this, they even said they lost $5 million in the process.
$5 million. That's not chump change.
No, not at all. It's a pretty clear sign they were serious about their concerns.
And it sends a message, too. Other investors see that, and they might get nervous.
Right, like, if Adani's backing out, maybe we should, too.
Exactly.
Now, former President Wickremesinghe, he's not exactly keeping quiet about this whole thing. He's come out swinging, basically saying that the current government's decision is a huge mistake, that it'll scare off Indian investors and hurt Sri Lanka's economic future. He even said there's no logic to the renegotiation and that it'll adversely affect all Indian investments.
He's not mincing words, is he?
Not at all. He sees this as a real blow to his legacy, and he's not wrong. This project was a big part of his plan to get Sri Lanka back on its feet.
Right, to attract investment, to improve infrastructure, and, to show that the country was moving in a positive direction.
But here's where things get even more interesting. The current government's saying that they've found other companies who are willing to build the wind farm for about half the price that Adani was asking. They're talking about 8.26 cents per unit.
Hold on, half the price. That's a huge difference.
It is, and it makes you wonder if the original deal was really the best option for Sri Lanka.
Sure. You have to wonder if maybe there was something to those concerns about inflated costs.
Yeah, but even if the price is better, there are still a lot of questions. Who are these other companies? Do they have the experience to pull off a project like this?
And are they reliable? Can they actually deliver what they're promising?
Right, and are there hidden costs that we're not seeing? Usually when something seems too good to be true, it probably is.
It pays to be skeptical.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Wickremesinghe, he's not letting up. He's still defending his policies, reminding everyone about how bad the economic crisis was. You had people storming government buildings. Things were really intense.
Yeah, that was a dark time for Sri Lanka.
It was. And Wickremesinghe's argument is that his plan, which included getting that IMF bailout, was what saved the country.
And he's saying that changing course now could put everything at risk.
Exactly. And he's even gone so far as to say that Sri Lanka will face further difficulties if my program is not completed.
So he's really drawing a line in the sand.
He is, and it's all happening at a really sensitive time because Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is supposed to visit Sri Lanka in early April.
Oh, wow. So you have this very public disagreement about an Indian investment happening right before a major diplomatic visit?
Yeah, the timing couldn't be worse.
Yeah.
You have to wonder how this is going to affect the discussions between the two countries.
It's definitely going to add some tension. I mean, how do you have a productive conversation about cooperation and partnership when there's this big elephant in the room?
It'll be interesting to see how they handle it, but when you step back and look at it all, it really boils down to two very different approaches.
Two different philosophies, almost.
Yeah. On the one hand, you have Wickremesinghe's approach, which is basically, let's get things moving, let's attract investment, even if it means making some compromises, because we need to get this economy going again.
And build those international relationships, right?
Right, show that Sri Lanka is a reliable partner. But then you have the current government's approach, which is more like, hold on, we need to make sure we're getting the best deal possible, even if it means slowing things down and maybe ruffling some feathers.
It's a classic dilemma, short-term gains versus long-term sustainability.
Exactly, and there's no easy answer.
Especially when you factor in the political pressures and the international dynamics.
It's a really fascinating situation to watch unfold.
And makes you think about all the factors that go into these kinds of decisions. I mean, is it ever really just about the money?
That's a great question, and it's something that everyone listening should consider. What are the real drivers behind a country's investment decisions? Is it purely about the bottom line, or are there always strategic and political considerations at play? I mean, in this case, you have two different governments with two very different perspectives.
It's also a question of priorities, right? How much weight should a country give to maintaining consistent policies, to build trust and attract foreign capital versus the need to adapt and maybe even change course when new information comes to light? The debate around the Adani project really highlights that tension.
It does, and it also makes you think about the ripple effects of these kinds of decisions. With Prime Minister Modi's visit on the horizon, how will this controversy impact the relationship between India and Sri Lanka? Will it create a lasting rift, or will they find a way to move forward?
I don't have a crystal ball, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
It is. This whole situation in Sri Lanka really is a perfect example of just how complex things can get when you're talking about governance and economic development on a global scale.
It's a reminder that there are rarely simple solutions.
It really is,
Yeah.
and it leaves us with a lot to think about.
Yeah.
In a world that's constantly changing, how do nations balance the need for stability and long-term planning with the ability to adapt to new information and make sure they're getting the best possible outcomes for their citizens?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is, and unfortunately, it's one that we'll have to keep wrestling with. But hopefully, by examining cases like this one in Sri Lanka, we can start to get a better understanding of the complexities and maybe even find some ways to navigate them more effectively. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
Anytime. Always fascinating to unpack these kinds of stories.
I agree. And to everyone listening, keep those questions in mind as you continue to follow this story and others like it, because understanding their dynamics is more important now than ever.